Rebuilding. It's interesting number of teams that aren't quite steady there at the moment. Maybe 5, 6 who are just kind of maybe new DORs in, or coaches, or just changing the way they play. We don't see that so often with so many, do we?
No, I think obviously we've had one team in domestically that have dominated for 4 or 5 years, and teams suddenly have to look at themselves and think, well, how are we going to get to that level? How are we going to compete against Saracens? I think Exeter are very much up there. They've probably been the best 1 or 2 in the last 4 or 5 years, but other teams have slipped down a bit. So at Harlequins, we're probably in the same sort of thing. New coach last year, Paul Gustard, some great coaches coming in, some great new players, but we're building. We're not sure whether it'll be this year or next year or the year after that we maybe would lift a trophy, but we hope we're on the way in that process, like a lot of other clubs as well.
Yeah, Topsy, you are forever inextricably linked with London Irish, who are quite well advanced, you feel, in their rebuilding process. Even though they have a lot of new names in this season, big star names, they started doing it in the Championship with Les Kiss and Decky Kidney, and they're doing all right, aren't they?
Absolutely, and I think, like you say, this has probably been 18 months to 2 years in the making in terms of when Les and Deck first came on board. They set out a plan, it involved the year in the Championship, and you're probably now just starting to see the fruits of that come to fruition with the signings, with the way the team wants to play, the culture, the stadium. These things take time. Sometimes you're giving it, sometimes you're not, and they have to be a project. And when that success bears, you don't know. But once you're on that journey, some teams get there quicker, some teams it's a longer process.
Lawrence, how much of a factor is Saracens' relegation at this stage of this season in teams looking to rebuild a little bit now, make big decisions, such as Wasps, and having Dai Young step aside, as we know at the moment?
Well, I think it's unprecedented, really, in terms of what's happened with Saracens, because it allows teams to make decisions that they might not have made had Saracens not been relegated. I mean, I can, hand on heart, from the inside and outside, say if Wasps were in a relegation battle, Dai Young might still be in the dugout, because he's been there 9 years and he has the skills to cope with that situation. The fact that Saracens are confirmed as relegated, Wasps have obviously decided to move in a different direction. They've been able to expedite that decision and rebuild themselves. You know, what is a rebuilding job? Well, it depends, one, on the expectation of the fans. Wasps are a club that a long time ago were used to winning. What are the budgets like at a rugby club? You know, what sort of players can you bring in as part of your recruitment process? What sort of coaches can you bring in? All these questions are there, and whenever a side replaces their director of rugby, there's obviously a job to be done, and it's interesting. Harlequins did it a little while ago. So did a number of other rugby clubs. Bath have changed their coaching structure. Wasps look like they're about to change theirs as well. And it's about time, you know. You've got to put those things in place. New coaches, new players coming in. Takes one recruitment rota before you can maybe get the players into a club that you want to as well. So there's lots of things that are going on, but at the moment it's been a bit of a two-horse race really between Saracens and Exeter, and the rest of these clubs have been catching up.
Toby Bruce has been in touch at #GP tonight, and Danny asks, how is Bath's rebuilding going? Obviously Stuart Hooper in as the new man in charge there this season, and how are they faring in the league of rebuilders?
Yeah, I think they're well in the middle of it. I think Stuart Hooper's a guy that loves Bath. He knows the club inside and out. He's worked his way up, and now he is the guy in charge. I think Bath have got a brilliant squad, and I think the fans' probably frustration is why we're not seeing that result in some silverware at the end of the season. You look at the likes of Anthony Watson, Jonathan Joseph, Francois Lowe, 3 world-class players. You know, they want to see them go through, and it'll take time, as Lawrence said. It takes time for coaches to instill their methods on players. You look at Bristol, it's taken Pat Lam a few years to get Bristol playing the way he wants to play, and I'm sure it's exactly the same at all the clubs around the Premiership.
Dermot Glynn asks, how important is club DNA when you're rebuilding a club? So I'll start with you on that, Topsy, because London Irish are in the midst of that at the moment, and Sean O'Brien seems to be the kind of talisman at the moment, and just by being Irish, I guess he's in the DNA. But how important is it to have an old school club member as part of it?
I think it's huge, because your DNA defines the essence of the club, what you're about, but then you need to add the components that make that up, whether it's from the top, from the DOR, to the players, to how you carry yourselves. It's all part and parcel. So you mentioned Sean O'Brien. Probably say London Irish's DNA is that we are an Irish exile club. We're welcoming to everybody, but then you need to add the bits and pieces. It's the good coaching team, it's the young players plus the established internationals, it's the stadium, the infrastructure, the training ground. These things all kind of hover around the DNA, and if you get that right, you can then start to build something like probably we're seeing with Bristol at the moment that really bears fruit and looks really promising.
Yeah, and on the flip side of that, if you look at two clubs that are struggling at the wrong end of the table, Leicester Tigers and Wasps, you might argue, well, maybe they've lost a little bit of their identity. Wasps, because they've had to move literally from London all the way up to Coventry, and after the honeymoon period, you know, few foreign signings that maybe haven't landed quite as well. Few players that have been there a long time, like your Haskells and Ciprianis, that have been washed through and through, leaving the door. Suddenly you're struggling to understand what your DNA is. Leicester, you look at them, they were a club built on, you know, forward aggression, forward attrition, forward domination. Their recruitment policy hasn't really reflected that in the last 10 years, and they're well beaten up front by most sides that they play against these days.
This is from Arthur 61, and he says, Lawrence, you are completely Wasps DNA. Can you get involved in the club's rebuild, please? Thank you, Arthur.
Well, listen, there's a decision to make, not for me personally, but for the club in terms of what direction they move forward.
Could you give yourself the job?
I could never do that. Of course I could. There's a decision to make. I'm sure there'll be a statement in the next couple of days in terms of the direction that they're heading. And then they've given themselves, you know, a few months to make that decision. But as Topsy said, it's really important who you put in at the top of the tree and what you can afford to, you know, put in there. What structure? Can you have a DOR? Can you have a head coach? So we'll watch this space. I'm 5-1.
Who's favourite at the moment?
Low.
Joe Worsley, isn't he? I don't know.
Oh, it's Joe. Okay. Well, that's a good team.